right, let's make sure this is working. I think I have to go ahead and slide. All right. Welcome in, everybody. Hopefully, ooh, that's a little loud. I'll be a little quieter. Sorry for the delay here. We're just having some technical set how it is. Welcome into the Bird Study Group meeting of February 2025. This is just a little layout of what we're going to go through before we get to our speaker. A little bit about our group, a few birds that have been seen last month, some project updates, a field guide of the month, just a little thing I'd like to throw in there, upcoming events, and then our speaker. So we have been protecting nature since 1919. The club is a nonprofit organization dedicated to the study, appreciation, and conservation of our wild plants and animals. Let's see if I can look from this side. Our meetings and field events are open to everyone, but membership is not required. However, by becoming a member, you get the journal, The Wood Duck, as example there, that's February. The Hamilton Study Area. I'm going to set this up here so I can look at it more. Encompasses the entirety of the cities of Hamilton and Burlington, the towns of Milton, Grimsby, and Oakville, and the reserves of Six Nations, the Grand River, and the Mississaugas, the Credit First Nation, and most of the city of Brantford, and in part also includes the towns of Halton Hills, regional municipality of Waterloo, townships of Puslinch, Guelph, Aramosa, and West Lincoln, the county of Haldimand, the cities of Mississauga and Guelph. So the HSA, the Hamilton Study Area, pretty big place, and that's our focus for the club as a whole, but also as birders.
Robert includes a tiny piece of Norfolk County.
It also includes a tiny piece of Norfolk County. I do know that, but I felt like I was getting a little pedantic, I thought. These lands have been the traditional territories of various indigenous peoples, including the Erie peoples, Attawandarock, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and the Mississaugas. The HSA's treaty agreements include the Between the Lakes Treaty, Brant Tract, Head of the Lake Purchase, Adjacents Treaty, Treaties 22 and 23. These agreements were between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, currently residing just north of Hagersville. Additionally, these lands were covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe to share and care for resources around the Great Lakes. The Hamilton Naturalist Club presently is steward over 11 nature sanctuaries, and plus has lots of other projects going on, which I'll get to later, representing 500 acres of land. The club also partners with many organizations to protect even more land beyond this. The club and its members conduct numerous bird surveys and participate in bird conservation efforts across the HSA. We encourage our community members to consider what they might be able to do to support new birders and new naturalists of all ages, including those who may be Indigenous or part of other minoritized groups. We are all together facing the challenges of climate change. Growing the naturalist and birding communities can help support the protection of what remains, and in time can help us reclaim what has been lost so far. Beyond just becoming a member of the club, we are seeking board members such as grant and fundraising director, sanctuary director. You could write for the Wood Duck. There's habitat restoration projects going on that you could volunteer for or lead a field event. You don't even need to know a lot to do a field event. Just be able to lead some people around and use the collective knowledge of the group to do so. Join the club Discord, which I keep forgetting to put the URL in the notes every single time, so maybe next month we'll get to that. But if you're interested in that, just let me know. Email birdstudygroup@hamiltonnature.org and I'll get you connected there. The HNC Bird Study Group goals include to keep our mind on birds beyond what we see or hear in the field, to allow for broader conversation about bird ecology, threats, efforts, and trends and predictions, bring awareness and amplify efforts, initiatives, projects that are having a positive impact, and to bring the average person and the expert birder into the same space. There weren't a lot of interesting birds seen this month, but this one thought was pretty cool. It's a really nice little photo. Barrow's goldeneye in Caledonia, found by Rob Palin along the Kinsman Park Trail. And this photo is by Rob Crawford that I lifted off eBird. I thought it was a nice photo. Some other notable birds in the HSI. Oh, it says December to January. That should be January to February. I did not update the title, but I updated the birds. Barrow's goldeneye, of course. American pipit. There was a couple of different ones found, actually. Gray catbird, yellow-bellied sapsucker. There were several of these seen in various places. Sandhill crane, field sparrow, eastern towhee. The pine warbler at Mount Albion, I think, went until about the end of January, but I haven't heard much since then, but who knows? It may just be nobody's checking. Not sure. Hermit thrush, king eider, the Pacific loon keeps going. The last place it was seen was Liftbridge. Red-headed woodpecker, there was one in Waterdown, and there was some black vulture activity reported in the DVCA. I mentioned American pipit. This is one that I found at the Druxbury banding site for snow bunting banding, but there was another one up in Halton as well, I believe, actually in Bronte, specifically Bronte Harbor. But I was really surprised to come across this bird because I was expecting Lapland longspurs and horned larks and snow buntings. And I was about to leave, and as I was starting to leave, this one bird kept flying in front of the car and then kept feeding or doing something, and then I would drive a little more slowly, and it would just stay in front of the car, and then it would fly a bit more, and then it would just keep doing it. And I was like, what is with this bird? Why is it so different than all the others? And so I got out and took a closer look and found that this is actually an American pipit because it was there pumping its tail and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it was pretty friendly for photos for a few minutes, and then it decided to just fly off to the east, never to be seen again, I believe. Other photos I've come across recently, red-winged blackbird. I pulled this off of eBird. These are some local photos. This is by David Goodridge. These guys will be back soon. If there's not already some already sitting around the borders of the HSA, they're going to be around real quick. Yellow-bellied sapsucker, I mentioned there's a lot of these around this winter. This is a photo by Abby Lewis, again, sourced from eBird. Every month I like to throw in just an interesting birding hotspot that I don't know if a lot of people go into. This one I wanted to call out a little bit because there are two entrances to this place, and not a lot of people know that. There's the entrance you go in and you pay your fee to the NPCA and you park, and there's a lot you can do in there. And then there's the other entrance where there's just one trail and you don't have to pay. It's quite a long trail, actually. In fact, they've extended it recently. It goes, I want to say it used to be 2.4 kilometers. Now it goes about 3.5 kilometers now. Quite a bit of habitat in there. It's kind of interesting. And that's the Tyneside Trail, part of Inbrook, CA. So it's a little recommendation, something to check out if you're looking for a new trail. Hamilton Christmas bird count, I've been working on that. It's part of the backstory is that I injured myself at the during the just before the Flamborough count, and the injury. I was able to plow through doing the Flamborough count, being out there with the injury, but then it just kept getting worse and worse and worse, and to the point where I was in so much pain I couldn't actually work on the data for either of these for like a month at least. And of course, during that time, I had a lot of other things back up on me, so I am catching up on this data. Here's some of the highlights that I've found so far. These are tentative, but there may be additional things found as we go along through the data and get missing reports in and things like that. But there's definitely been 100 species the day of, and 5 count week species. So that's pretty average for us, but it's still amazing to me that we can get that many species on a Christmas bird count in this area. This included 33 common ravens, which just shatters the record. I think it was like 17 previously. And again, red-bellied woodpeckers and Carolina wrens breaking records again. Just every year, it's usually a new record for them. So other things coming up, we have spring, of course, on the horizon, and some things to mention. I always try to plan for the peak warbler week, which this year looks like it'll probably be the second full week of May, if I'm just guessing. Of course, mileage may vary, but around then tends to be your peak in the HSA. Some places you might want to check out would include Edge Lake, Paletta, Woodland Cemetery. 50 Point is one of my favorites as well too. The Niagara Peninsula Hawk Watch is starting in March, so that's coming up very soon. So if you go to nphawkwatch.ca, you can go find out more about signing up for that and becoming a hawk counter, and it's pretty fun. I've enjoyed it in the past, just sitting up in that tower, and I think now with COVID more past us, I think, I don't know if they allow more than one person up there again, but they do? Okay, good, yeah. So it's pretty fun. The American Woodcocks are coming back, of course, very soon. We're hopefully gonna have a walk in April, as we usually do. The Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas, this is gonna be its last year, so if you're looking to participate in that, you can contact them on birdsontario.org and find out more with what you can do, because that last breeding season is starting up soon. And the Ontario Eastern Bluebird Society, their AGM is next month. It's right here at this building even. So, you know where it is already. So if you go get yourself a membership, you can participate in that. And bluebirding is a pretty fun experience, I think. I've maintained quite a few bluebird trails over the years. Speaking of bluebirds, here's all the winter sightings of bluebirds this year. They really are sticking around in the winter more and more, I find. And this is just the list of all the 2025 bluebirds. I'm sure as the weeks go on, that will explode. I forgot to put in there, but I was thinking of putting in a map of like just showing what it is on an average year, but honestly it would just be, the entire map would just be covered with with little blue and red points. So yeah, you probably get the idea. A little bit about some stuff that's going on that might be of interest to you all. Grimsby Wetlands, Bruce and Laurie McKenzie have continued their work on this space. It is an award-winning little project of the Hamilton Naturalist Club, and it's at the former sewage lagoons at the west end of Grimsby. It's a 29-acre property, south shore of Lake Ontario. Belongs to the Region of Niagara, so it's not something owned by the club, but we do manage there. 9 acres belongs to the Department of Defense as well, right next door. And a little update from them. They've taken advantage of the good amount of ice this year to basically go walk out in the ice and do some things right in the middle of the wetlands, such as setting up these little structures. So these are little tripods made of cedar rails. The legs have anchors on them, and the idea is that when the ice melts, the structures will sink into the bottom. The tripods will then act as places for the birds to perch, basically. So little advantage for birders and photographers to have some opportunities in the coming year. And just so you're aware, in case you're not aware, there's a lot of other birding organizations around the city. The Pipits, for one, the bird-friendly Hamilton Burlington, the Larks, the Feminist Bird Club Hamilton, Birdsong Hamilton, Niagara Peninsula Hawk Watch, and the Ontario Bluebird Society. I picked this guide up a couple weeks ago. It's actually a really good one. This just came out, and it's so funny how like taxonomies change so fast that this new one, as of 2025, doesn't have the 2024 taxonomies, because those just came out in like in August. And so if you look up American herring gull, you're not going to find it. You're going to find herring gull, and that's just because, print deadlines and everything. Things move so fast. But what I love about this book, and I just kind of discovered today as I was looking through it, was that I haven't seen any other guides that do this, but it actually puts the banding codes in there, which I thought such a tiny thing, but I think today that's just so incredibly useful for a new birder to get that. It's an interesting guide because they have these little thumb indexes, so there's like about 6 points that you can just get to in the book immediately, because you just stick your thumb there and you're at the sparrows, you're at the warblers or shorebirds or whatever. And they also have a quick index on the back and front. It's a visual index, so it's an interesting little guide. I like it. Upcoming events, if you want to get out there. Fletcher Creek in winter, assuming everything doesn't melt, we'll be following the trail southern portion of the property. Different habitats leading to the only fen in the Hamilton watershed. I think it might be the only fen in the Hamilton study area too. Hopefully the fen will be frozen over, and we'll get to get out onto it. The environment's there, rarely found anywhere else. Bruce, who's leading this outing, has been visiting the property for 40 years. he's hoping to share a lot of stories with you, and if you know Bruce, he will definitely share many stories with you. And next month's HNC general meeting will be Cultivating a Sense of Wonder with John Hanna. So there'll be more information of that forthcoming on the in the wood duck and so on. So, and the next bird study meeting, we're going to be talking about the deep dive into the state of Canada's birds with Kyle Horner, Monday, March 17th. So this is about a publication that came out late in 2024. That's a long-term study of Canada's birds. And when I heard about it, I thought, oh, well, I need to get someone in from Birds Canada to present on this because I thought it'd be really interesting to the club. So I'm really looking forward to that presentation. But I'm also looking forward, of course, to tonight's presenter. Pam is a master gardener with special interest in ecological gardening practices. She writes for the Halton Master Gardeners newsletter and blog and does presentations and home gardening consultations. Over the past few years, she has redesigned her garden that backs onto Dundurn Park with birds in mind. Her talk is about how urban gardens can support beleaguered songbirds. So Pam MacDonald will be coming up here, and as she comes up, we'll be doing a little bit of technical things to get things working right. But I'm very much looking forward to it because I've been developing my backyard from a patch of lawn when I moved in to now a lot of native plants and pollinator things, so I'd love to hear more of what I can do. So please welcome Pam.
Thank you.
I'm going to set up your
All right.
thing here.
I need all the help I can get. I have trouble operating the toaster at home.
All right. So I'll stay up here. So.
All right. So before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge and give thanks to the peoples of all the territories for sharing the land in order for us to continue our work today. And as gardeners and naturalists, we can, it's too bad I can't read this, we can seek reconciliation by caring for and healing the land we live on. Rob, I'd like to thank you for your introduction, and I'd like to add a bit more about the Master Gardeners who are here with me tonight, because there's a lot in common with the Naturalist Club, and I'll just get my cheering section to wave their hands. These are all Master Gardeners. We have a lot in common now, but that wasn't always the case when we were primarily providing education and advice about traditional gardening. But we've evolved with the times, and we now focus on primarily on gardening with native plants and educating the gardening public on eco-friendly gardening practices. Several of my master gardening friends who are here tonight will help with answering questions, I hope. And also, I hope you'll chat with them afterward. We're all interested in this topic, and we all share the goal of addressing biodiversity loss in our communities. The title of this presentation is Your Garden Through a Bird's Eyes, because as I've been on my journey to create a more bird-friendly garden, I frequently ask myself, how long will it take the birds to notice I've made a change? Will they like the changes I've made? And will it bring new species of birds into my garden? Now, at the risk of losing my credibility right out of the gate, I'm going to share with you that I actually have conversations with some of the birds that live in the park directly behind my house. That park is Dundurn, and I call this group of birds the Dundurn Avian Residents Association, or DARA for short. And this is Dr. T, the chairman of the association. We frequently confer on what's happening in the park and what I should be planting in my garden. With his guidance and advice, I'm working on making my garden a 5-star destination for overwintering and migratory songbirds. Now, as well as Dr. T, there's someone else I'd like to introduce you to if you aren't already familiar with him, and that is the entomologist Doug Tellamy. How many of you know of Doug Tellamy? Okay, well, there's a few that don't. Well, you're going to know more about him by the end of the night. He has made a seismic difference to our understanding of how ecosystems work and the role of native plants in supporting food webs, starting with insects, which in turn support birds and other animals. Talamy introduced the term keystone plants to help us understand that without these particular plants, ecosystems would collapse, much as an archway would without its keystone. Talamy and his team at the University of Delaware identified keystone plants by studying how many different species of insects they support. They found that only 5% of native plants provide about 75% of the food sources that support food webs. For this audience of naturalists and passionate birders, and in the context of Hamilton's biodiversity plan, Dr. T and I have agreed we should also speak more broadly about how we can support birds in all the settings where human activity has encroached on them, including urban and suburban gardens, but also urban public spaces like the ones the Naturalist Club has stewardship of as well, sort of like, Victoria Park, York Boulevard, and so on. And then there's the nature sanctuaries that HNC owns. I'm getting a little bit out of my lane here, but in all three settings, birds are looking for the same habitat characteristics, and having the right plants to support them is critical. Milkweed and monarch butterflies, that is a well-known example of a butterfly becoming endangered when the host plant is under pressure. But that is only an example. It's not an exception. Many species of insects have similar relationships with a species, genera, or family of plants. Butterflies get a lot of attention as pollinators, but they are far more ecologically important in their larval stage as part of the food web, and specifically food for baby birds. So, when you see a lot of enthusiasm for initiatives like Butterfly Way and Pollinator Paradise Gardens, remember these are diners and snack bars for birds. So, to net out Doug Talamy's message, what he is saying is that if there are no native host plants, there are no caterpillars. And if there are no caterpillars, there are no chickadees. Insects are very nutritious, particularly caterpillars. Pound for pound, most insect species contain more protein than beef. As well, baby birds cannot digest seeds, and the hard exoskeleton of insect bodies would do damage if rammed down the throat of a baby bird. So, the parents feed them something packed with protein they can swallow and digest. Caterpillars are the pablum of the bird world. The bottom line is that if we want to have birds in our backyards, we must have caterpillars and other insects. And to have these, we must have plants that the insects can eat, and those are native plants. If you haven't read any of Doug Talamy's books, I encourage you to do so. They are engaging and they explain the science in easily understood terms. And in case you haven't guessed by now, Dr. T is actually the version of Doug Talamy that lives in my head. Before getting into specific gardening recommendations, I'm going to detour to urban sites H&C has stewardship of, our activities that are going on there, and plans we have for 2025. I started thinking of these spaces as urban sanctuaries, but that's only my own term, and it's, I guess at this stage of the game, somewhat aspirational. The routine activities that go on there are weeding and thinning out of plants, cleaning up pathways, removing invasive plants. We also do have some initiatives like tree planting at Captain Cornelius Park, the installation of additional raised garden beds at York Boulevard. Of course, of our activities, I can't overemphasize the need to identify and manage invasive species. This is even more important in the sanctuaries because of the ability of some particularly aggressive species to create monocultures. For example, buckthorn and Phragmites. They will crowd everything else out. These guys are major habitat killers. And even in the urban sites, we have found bindweed at York and Victoria Park, and we found a single buckthorn at Victoria Park as well, which we got rid of very quickly. In the context of the biodiversity plan, we have some plans. Jen, with a little bit of nudging, has identified a need, and some members, including myself, have volunteered to inventory and assess all the plants, the mix and the maintenance requirements of each of them, with a view to the sites having long-term success as spaces to support a diversity of native plant species, pollinators, and birds. We will use this review to edit and add plant material where needed. The sites are each quite distinct, and what looks like success at one location may not be the same as at another. For example, there's a very small garden at City Hall, which operates more like a pollinator patch, and it is really prolific. It's 6 by 20, and we aren't going to be planting any trees there. Whereas Captain Cornelius, there's a little forest there that's being cleaned up, all the buckthorns taken out, and lots of trees being planted. This project won't happen entirely with volunteers. There will be a need for other resources with native plant expertise. I'm looking at you, Master Gardeners. I wanted to talk about this because urban sites are not just about pollinators. Other wildlife, including birds, amphibians, and so on, benefit from them. These are the spaces in the city where biodiversity lives. And to put it more plainly, bird people, these are bedrooms as well as diners for birds. So now, back to what birds are looking for when they visit a garden and assess it as a potential breeding site or a stopover on migration. They are looking for 4 things: water, food, nesting, and shelter sites. Birds need water for hydration and cleaning their flight equipment, that is their plumage. The sound of moving water invites birds and other wildlife to check out your garden. Making clean water available in your garden all year is invaluable to birds. Because open water is often inaccessible in winter, it is the time of year that birds risk dehydration. So if you can, put something out even as simple as a shallow dish with water and refill it on a daily basis, you will be reducing that particular stress for birds during the winter. Birds also need water to clean their feathers of dirt, parasites, and bacteria. Keeping their flight equipment in good order is really important for their survival, which I'm sure all of you know. Bathing and preening afterwards spreads oils through their feathers and keeps their feathers in top condition. It's always important to have clean water, but in the context of bird flu, it is especially important to make sure you're changing the water, keeping it clean in your bird baths and whatever else you have in the way of water for birds. This water feature in the picture is one that's in my garden, and something that I quite like about it is that it not only provides water for the birds and the bubbling attracts them into the garden, but it also provides water for other creatures, like this little toad whose name is Henry. For more information about water features and water for birds, both Audubon and the Cornell Ornithology Lab have lots of information. When it comes to choosing nesting sites, birds are a lot like humans. It's all about location. One of the criteria birds use for choosing a nest site is its height from the ground. Keystone species like oaks and maples are surprisingly not where the majority of songbirds nest. The keystone status of these trees relates to the quantity of insects they host, many of which are food for songbirds and other wildlife. In fact, most songbirds feel safest and choose to nest in a zone between 5 and 20 feet from the ground. A garden with small trees and lots of shrubs will attract breeding birds. You can definitely get a 5-star rating even if you don't have a tall canopy tree in your yard. Some birds are very picky about nesting sites, and some not so much, as the top picture of the wren and the geranium planter illustrates. On the other hand, orioles will only nest in canopy trees. Hummingbirds can also be quite particular because they will be looking for sites both close to water and a steady supply of nectar to conserve their energy. I actually had a rather sad thing to watch in my garden, which helped me make a very difficult decision, or it was difficult at the time. I had a very beautiful wigelia with bright lime leaves and a beautiful deep colored flower. But this hummingbird kept coming and trying to feed at it. And I realized this guy was wasting a lot of energy on a flower he wasn't going to get anything from. So those were early days, and I thought I was going to keep that plant. Well, that one's no longer with us. On the right are a list of locations that birds will typically choose to nest in. But eaves of buildings and flower pots, among other vessels, will be used by opportunists like robins and wrens. The best nesting materials are the debris birds find in natural settings, things like twigs, leaves, grasses, and seed fluff. They'll be happy to use all of them, as well as fibrous strands of stems from milkweed, joe pye, and hyssops left standing over winter. I've watched, I have some swamp milkweed close to a window, and they just go nuts in the spring, pulling the strands off of those stems. It's really quite interesting to watch. Some things that knowledgeable birders like you probably know is that things like dryer lint can disintegrate when it gets wet and is therefore a really poor choice of nesting material, so don't put it out for them. Human hair and pet hair released from brushes can often have residues and which can harm the birds, and things like yarn and string are tough enough that they could easily wrap around a leg or a neck. And again, leave it to them to find their own materials, and if you have native plants, there's going to be plenty of them in your garden. For birds that are here all year round, like cardinals and blue jays, priority shifts from nesting to sheltering sites in winter. Migratory birds passing through our area on their way to breed or back to southern winter grounds will also be looking for suitable shelter and rest in. 70% of North American terrestrial birds migrate, so this is not a small need. They will be looking for sites that are out of the elements and out of the reach of predators. For migratory birds to make it to their destination, they also need water and high-quality food readily available. It can set them back. They may not even survive if too much time and energy are spent searching for shelter, water, and food. If you have a garden full of native plants, they are the option that they will look for that will provide shelter and the food these birds need, often in the same plant. On the right are a list of locations birds will seek for nesting and shelter that you may have or could consider planting on your property. A thicket is really just several shrubs planted in a group. Hedges, mixed shrub borders, and foundation plantings can all function as thickets. The key to creating a bird-friendly thicket is to choose native plants, put them close together, and not be overzealous about pruning. If you are prepared to go a bit wilder in a corner of your garden, consider including a native rose. The birds will eat the rose hips, and the thorns will deter predators. Evergreen trees and shrubs also offer excellent shelter, and they are good choices even if they are not native. Many of us have yews and, just lots of non-native evergreens, and birds will be very happy using them as shelter. Many of us have older cedar hedges that can be a gardening challenge when they age out and are getting leggy. They are, however, really popular with birds for shelter, and a way to deal with these old cedars is to plant native shrubs in front of them to create layers that attract birds and are also attractive to the human eye. Food is the most complex requirement of birds because it varies with the species of the bird, the stage of the bird's life cycle, and can vary with the time of year as well. Native plants are the best options for providing nutrition directly in the form of seeds and fruits, and also as hosts for the insects which harness the plant's energy when they eat the foliage. In fact, 96% of terrestrial birds eat insects as nestlings and fledglings, and they are the mainstay of adult diets of many songbirds. Talamy's research found that a breeding pair of chickadees needs to collect between 6,000 and 9,000 caterpillars to raise one clutch of chicks, and will seek out nest sites with hunting grounds within 500 radius of the nest, again, to conserve energy. It's clear that birds have shaped their entire life cycles, including their migrations and feeding habits around plant communities and the seasonal fruits and insects they serve up. So about berries. Prior to migration, songbirds must increase their weight by 50 to 100%. And many songbirds switch their diet of insects to mostly berries because berries consume less energy than pursuing insects. They also have a very high in nutrition. Researchers at the University of Rhode Island are studying the diet of birds preparing for migration. According to this research, birds select deeply pigmented berries that are high in antioxidants and fat prior to migration. These antioxidants help birds handle stress. On their southward journey, they fly at night for 4 to 6 hours without a break and must stop during the day and refuel several times. They spend 4 to 5 days at each stopover, where most consume nutrient-rich berries if they are available. Excuse me a moment. If they fail to find a sufficient fuel for the next leg of their journey, they become weak and they can be vulnerable to hawks, owls, and other predators. Scientists have learned that even small patches of native plants can produce enough food and shelter for migratory birds, and with their high fat content and extra oxidants, native plants are very nutritious. Because the native plants usually have strongly colored berries, each black or red, and have leaves or stems that are bright red, birds can easily find them. Also, these native berries ripen at exactly the right time to fuel migration. Pardon me. We seem to have got lost here. No, I don't. This is what I mean about the toaster.
Yeah. Over to here.
Oh.
I think maybe you just need to click in there.
All right, and then it'll...
There you go.
Oh, okay.
And then we'll switch here.
Ah, yes. It's a shame I was having trouble with this one. Dr. T helped me with this menu. I thought you might enjoy it. This is what I do at 3 o'clock in the morning when I ought to be sleeping. So food, nesting, and shelter are all functions of plants, whether in gardens, parks, or sanctuaries. Other native plants are important too, but trees and shrubs are the backbones and ribs of a garden and need more time to become productive. So if we're trying to build or rebuild bird habitat, it seems to me a framework of trees and shrubs is a good place to start. Mr. T also has some suggestions for what we should do, which is a little broader than my trees and shrubs, which I wanted to put up because really all of these things need to be taken into account. But for this presentation, my focus is the layers in a landscape that birds use the most, which is trees and shrubs. So where to start? In switching up your garden. And a really good place to start is by removing the invasives. This is Tony, otherwise known as my hero and invader crusader. Tony, could you please stand up? I could tell you lots of good stories about the invader crusader and technical genius as well. Anyway, on to the gardening. So this is where to start. And these photos are of us removing, or that's the royal we, Tony removing a lot of honeysuckle that we had on our property. And in hindsight, it horrifies me to think of those cardinals coming and sitting on that pergola, eating those seeds and flying off into the ravines where I have seen honeysuckle. So, this one's personal. In the back behind Tony, you can also see a fence, or maybe you can't, but anyway, it's covered with English ivy, and it's next up this year. We're going to take it off and replace the fence that is being currently held up by the ivy. So once you've removed the invasives, the next thing maybe to think about is transitioning. Oh, pardon me. Actually, I've got one more in there, I think. Okay, so these are a few that we had, invasives we had in our garden. And I've mentioned the honeysuckle. I've picked these particular ones because they're particularly egregious. The ground covers have a way of getting into the woods. And the ones that have berries, as I mentioned with the honeysuckle, the birds that we love can actually be a vector for getting them into natural spaces. So if you've got any of these on your property, blow them up, please. So then we move on to keepers. And I seem to have lost that slide. But anyway, we'll talk about keepers. We have a Kentucky coffee tree on our property, which I consider really good luck. So we, in fact, have a beautiful canopy tree. But you don't necessarily have to have a canopy to have a successful bird garden. If you have one, nurture it, love it, be grateful. But don't give up on bird gardening if you don't. In our garden, we have some smaller trees that I consider keepers, even though they are not native. One of them is this old white flowering redbud, which is a cultivar. It's on the decline, but it is absolutely adored by birds who sit, they perch, they can see the yard, they go after insects in the bark. And I think one of the reasons it's so popular is that it really is a lot like the understory of trees in a Carolinian woodland. One of the things I love to watch is a game that goes on every spring. There's two trees in this picture. One is the redbud, the other one is a crab apple, which is another one of my keepers. And we have flight school every year. So the young birds will kind of flit from one over to the other, back to the other, and then go and have a swim in the bird bath. We get that all summer long, or well, in the spring. Anyway, it's wonderful to watch. So the reason, again, with the crab apple, it's not a native species, but the birds love it. They do eat the apples, and it's dense enough that they use it for shelter. And I've found nests in it as well. So all in all, one to keep. It is on its way out, though, and I have a plan in mind for this crab apple, and that is, as it dies, it's going to become a snag. And I think this is kind of the next big thing in native plant gardening. We're getting so that we're pretty familiar with having rudbeckia and, lots of prairie plants. The gateway plants. We've all got the gateway plants. But it's time to start thinking about how we can look at trees differently, not only live ones, but dead ones. So this is going to be a snag, and it's probably going to have some very artfully draped Virginia creeper on it. Okay, so I could go on and on about that stuff. Okay. Oh, yeah, you can see in that last photo the Virginia creeper starting at the bottom. Snags. We had a Norway maple, which, first of all, we spent a lot of time looking after it and nurturing it and pruning it, and then I should have had a V8. We figured out that it was actually a invasive species. So then we went and spent a lot of money to have it taken down. And in hindsight, if I knew then what I knew now, I might not have had the whole thing taken. I might have treated that as a snag as well. I don't know if any of you recognize that piece of sculpture with the people standing around it. That's on Lock Street. That's in fact a metal sculpture of a snag covered in these beautiful metal Lock Street, be sure to have a look. And the next time the city wants to take a snag down in a park near you, such as Dundurn, you can call them up and say to them, why can't you leave it up? You actually paid to put one of these things on the middle of Lock Street. Anyway, that's my take on this. So snags are in, as far as I'm concerned. The key to creating a bird-friendly thicket, which we spoke about briefly, is to choose native shrubs, plant them close together, and not be overzealous about pruning. Have I been here before? I think so. If you are prepared to go a bit wilder, yes, I have. I'm just checking to make sure you guys are paying attention. Okay, so we've discussed my. Yeah, you know what? Let's go back one again, because. No, one forward.
One more?
No, go forward. No, you're going
Oh,
in the wrong
forward.
direction.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. Back.
Here?
Back.
Back.
Okay, there. There's one more thing I wanted to point
That was the
out.
right one.
Is, as well as snags, something else we need, I think, to be thinking about is coppicing. Because a tree can have multiple lives. Like oak trees in England lived for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and they were nurtured over and over and over again to be sources of lumber for shipbuilding. This is a way for us to approach trees in the city as well. We don't need to take them necessarily right down to the ground. We can let them come back up, and in their second iteration, they often grow in this shape, which also makes them very bird friendly. Let's see. Okay. Right. So again, in making selections in your garden, do focus on keystone plants. With the climate and biodiversity crisis we are facing, it can really be daunting, but there is a little bit of good news. We do have an increasing number of native plant nurseries in our area where you can buy native plants. We're so lucky in some of the examples of spaces that still have the feel of what was once there. Any of you who've been to Princess Point and seen the tall grass prairie or the black oak savanna, that's what this used to look like. And you don't want your yard to look exactly like that, but it does give us some idea of what our spaces could be like. Okay, so as I've kind of alluded to, there are lots and lots of plants that you can put in your garden, but I'm focusing my personal recommendations on small trees and shrubs. These are the ones that make up the middle layer in the woodlands, and songbirds rely on them heavily for nesting and resting, as well as food. And they also work really well as landscape plants. And as a gardener talking to you about gardens, that's a factor. I think, many of us live in urban settings and we still have to think about how our gardens present. And so if we can make choices that present well in the community and also support birds, it's a real win. And for us in southern Ontario, there are lots of small trees and shrubs that are Carolinian in nature, and so we've got choice. So there are some genuses of plants that are represented in this layer that I particularly like, and these are the viburnums, the dogwoods, and the birches. All three genus have multiple species that will thrive in a variety of conditions and all make beautiful landscape plants. And many of them meet 3 of the 4 requirements for complete habitat. They will provide shelter, food, and nesting sites. So here are some dogwoods to consider for your garden. And as you'll see, I picked ones that will do well in various environments. They all have beautiful flowers. They come in various sizes. And one of the nice things to know is that the flowering dogwood, the one on the end, Cornus florida, which has been under a lot of stress and was dying off, there has been some research that suggests, even though they're understory plants, if they're planted in full sun in a sheltered place, they have a much better chance of survival. So I know they're available as well. So you may want to give them a try. I got 2 last year. One of them pooped out. But I do have the other one, and it's coming along, and I've got great hopes that the one that started out this big will one day look like that. Viburnums are another group of trees come shrubs that are really, really pretty, have berries and come in a variety of sizes and will do well in a variety of sites. Viburnums, you may know, were under attack by a pest called the viburnum leaf beetle. They seem, many of them, to be building up some resistance to that. So at one time, landscapers and garden centers were kind of not selling as many because of that problem. As I say, we're getting past that now, and it's pretty safe to plant a viburnum in your garden, a native viburnum, and it stands a good chance of surviving. I got 4 varieties, I think, 3 or 4, and they're all doing just fine. And birches. There's a birch for every situation, and I mean, they're just spectacularly beautiful trees. Need I say more? And here's a group of smaller shrubs for you to consider. Snowberry is adaptable in a wide range of light, moisture, and soil types. It will, in fact, grow in full shade, though if you want it to be thicker, you have to give it a little bit more sunshine. Chokeberry is another adaptable shrub with colorful berries and a vibrant fall color. I think this is a great alternative to things like burning bush and things that we are attracted to with bright foliage. New Jersey tea is a low-growing, dense shrub with nectar-rich flowers that hummingbirds like. One thing you have to be careful with these is they do not like wet soil. They will get root rot. But if you've got a dry, sunny place, these are lovely. And these are one of those plants that only gets about this big. And you can't say that for too many native shrubs. They're really quite dainty. Purple flowering raspberry is yet another really pretty shrub. All of these will perform best as shelter if you plant them in at least a minimum of 3. And if you've got the space, you may even want to plant more of them together to create that effect of a thicket, or along a fence line, a mix of these can be really very beautiful as well. So these are some examples of places that you can get DIY designs that if you want to start making changes in your own garden, you can go online and find some design, or find some plants. The one I'm really proud to present is, I don't know if you'll recognize, Greener Ward 1. That's in Hamilton. That's Ward Wonderful, where I live. And Paul O'Hara is the gentleman who designed these, and there's a website that he's got multiples of these and a fair amount of other information. He's also responsible for the design of the Victoria Park pollinator garden, which went through some tough times, but it's starting to come back, and the solid bones of that garden are really a testament to Paul's knowledge. The layers are there. What's missing are kind of ground level plants that we're this year probably going to be able to replace quite a few of. But the shrubs are there, the trees are there, there's beautiful pathways. He did a wonderful job with these. He isn't here tonight by any chance, is he? Oh, that's too bad. Okay, how am I doing for time? I must be, got past Word Wonderful. Okay, so There are just so many excellent books, websites, blogs. These are just a few that I particularly like, at least they're my current favorites. I've also put up the Bird Canada poster because this website that's been developed by a group of people in southwestern Ontario is just, it has everything. It has information about birds, it has information about plants, it has information about design, soils, whatever. They're going to put me out of business. There's going to be no more bird presentations thanks to these guys. But, you know, I'm grateful to them for that. So this is a really marvelous resource. Now, if any of this has whetted your appetite, volunteer night is coming up. Volunteer orientation is coming up. And that group of badasses on the left could use a little more help. You know, I mentioned that we do garden maintenance. Well, we could use some maintainers. And Jen, where are you? Where are you, Jen? Could you please stand up? Oh, come on, come on. We also need buckthornicators. Could you turn around, please? Do you guys know Martha Howard? Well, she's responsible for that shirt. No surprise. So we are coming to the end, and I guess one of the punchlines is that small changes can have a big impact. When I first started paying attention to the birds in my garden and started thinking about what I could do in the garden, this was who was coming into the garden, and having come from Toronto, this felt these guys. However, this is what it looks like now. Like, I'm running out of space. I'm going to have to start a new page. So all these species come into our garden, a lot of them with some regularity. The two that are the least common, I think I've only seen a couple of times, are the ones down in the right corner, the scarlet tanager, and only once did I ever see the cerulean warbler. And I don't think I would have seen or recognized him if there hadn't been some Naturalist Club birders in the park, at 5 o'clock in the morning. So I had to go out and find out what they were doing. And that's who they were looking for. And I actually got to see him, so that was extremely exciting. So, in parting, this is what I would like to say. Birds have some important roles in ecosystems. They disperse seeds, eat enormous numbers of insects. Some pollinate plants and dispatch rodents. They are also environmental, the health of ecosystems and the environment. These pragmatic considerations are excellent reasons to create a welcoming environment for birds in our gardens. Birds also enhance our lives in less tangible ways. Their presence brings us closer to nature. Their songs give us pleasure. Watching them splash around in a bird bath can make us smile. There's some recent research that even suggests our mental health is enhanced by their presence in our lives. I hope you've enjoyed the talk, and I hope you have many birds in your garden. Thank you. Thank you for all your help.
So we'll take some questions if people
Sure.
have them. And
Sure.
also, I know there was a couple slides that were, I don't know if there was a slide out of order at one point or something.
Oh, probably.
So there was a couple that, to cover
Okay,
that.
I apologize for that.
It's okay.
Even with a mob helping.
So just so people can get to talk about these things, but
Right.
I did have
Does
to.
anybody recognize, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Does anybody recognize the seed, the fluffy seed head? Thank you, Master Gardener.
I think we were on this one for a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this was another one that didn't get hit too often. But are there any questions? Here we go.
Could you give us an example of, say, 5 keystone species plants for Carolinian garden that would grow in a more shady area?
Well, let's see. The birches, the viburnums, the dogwoods. all have, they have a variety of species, and some of them will do well in shade. So that's 3. The snowberry that I mentioned will grow it'll grow in impossible conditions. It will grow in dry shade. In fact, I'm going to use it as essentially, although it'll get this high, I'm putting it in a north-facing side. I'm going to put so many of them together, it'll be like a little ground cover, but this high. Are you thinking tall plants or short plants? Are you thinking ground covers or shrubs?
Both, because there'll be some depth, so.
Okay, so the maple leaf viburnum that I mentioned, it also does well in shade, and it has the foliage is beautiful in the fall. Master gardeners, help me out. Spice bush, northern spice bush.
Bush honeysuckle?
Bush honeysuckle.
Okay, so that's what you like, goldenrod?
Yes, if you're looking for forbs, for flowering plants, there's lots of, some of them are better behaved than others. There's lots of nice ground covers. There's 2 varieties of wild strawberry that make beautiful ground covers. One is woodland strawberry, and the other is wild strawberry. Woodland strawberry will take more shade, and as it fills in, it completely covers the ground, and at least in my garden, well into the late fall and early winter, it's still green. So yeah, that's a good one too, at that level.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions?
What if you have a septic field? What can you do to naturalize that, reducing the function, but also adapting maintenance?
You know, I don't have a good answer for that off the top of my head, but I can get you an answer to that one, okay? Actually, if you don't, well, I'll try and remember it, which is, again, septic. All right, Tony, remember this.
How are you going to get the answer to the questioner?
This is a good also. Thank you for your help. What's your name? Natalie. Okay. And Natalie, are you attached to the man that's sitting next to you by any chance? Are you attached to that guy? No. All right. All right. There's a perfect solution.
Yeah.
Okay. So any more questions? Yes.
Do you have any concerns or suggestions if you're trying to integrate a vegetable garden with the native plants around your property?
I don't think there should be concerns. I mean, the thing about having native plants, it attracts birds, it will take care of pests. Yeah. No, where it can be frustrating is sometimes they want to eat your fruit, but, you know, as you saw, I'm happy to share with the birds. But no, I don't, no, they're not incompatible at all. All right, well, now I have.
One more here.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
You want to finish what you were saying? Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say when the questions are finished, I have some questions.
I was just going to say something I worry about is, as I'm trying to get more birds to come to the garden, is little neighborhood paths. And I worry about. I'm not the only one who's worried about this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I worry about like putting a bird bath out and attracting the birds.
Yeah, you know, that's really, one of the things you can do is make sure that bird bath is in a location where cats cannot creep up on it. So, you know, I talked about where there's flight school. The birds can sit up there, and when they go down, birds can sit up there, and by the time of that bird bath, it's fairly safe. But you're right, it is a big problem.